Chapter 1. Katie Sutton really wanted to swear. Normally, she wasn't a swearing person. She couldn't afford to be when she worked at the local daycare in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, sometimes before the person knew it themselves. She also didn't enjoy cussing. She had grown up in a community that frowned on it. Her parents hadn't liked swearing either, so Katie generally didn't use such vocabulary. However, in this moment, she was frustrated and angry to the point of swearing or crying. She was not going to cry. In a couple of weeks, she might even share the story at the local canteen at the ballpark with friends and laugh about it. Right now, she sat on the corner of the dumpster and looked hopefully again for her set of keys, which were lost among the mess. "What are you doing?" a male voice drawled. Katie closed her eyes for a moment. It just had to be Jackson Davis who found her like this. Trent Davis had been one of her best friends growing up. She had been raised on the neighboring farm to the Davises, and had made their home pretty much her home away from home until she went to college. Jackson was Trent's older brother. Trent's sexy, tall, handsome older brother that she had been crushing on since she discovered that boys were different than girls. Her cheeks flushed a little, and she opened her eyes, desperate to find her keys. "I lost my keys." Katie tried for an even tone. She was marginally successful in disguising her distress. "In the dumpster?" Jackson asked, looking up at Trent's best friend. She was an athletic brunette tomboy who had kept his brother on his toes for much of their childhood. Not because Katie would lead anyone into trouble. No, trouble had the habit of finding Katie on a regular basis. "How does that happen?" Katie sighed. "One of the bags carrying my groceries ripped. You know how cheap and thin those things are. The jar of pickles broke all over the pavement. When I picked up what was left of my groceries, my purse strap kept falling off my shoulder." "And?" Jackson prompted as Katie's voice trailed away. He put his bags beside her bags on the ground, then hefted himself onto the edge of the dumpster, swinging a leg over. "Careful!" Katie cried out. "Don't move anything yet. I'm hoping to just spot them rather than having to dig through everything." He carefully settled himself on a corner and looked at the pile of smelly garbage bags and loose items. "How did the keys end up in here?" Katie rubbed her temple. "I may have been angry and used a little too much force to swing the purse strap onto my shoulder. The keys kind of flew off my finger and fell in here." "Are you sure? They didn't land on the outside or behind the dumpster?" Jackson shifted a bag carefully with the toe of his boot. "No, I checked all around the outside," Katie responded. Giving up on just spotting the keys, she slowly lowered herself in, feeling the garbage squish down beneath her. It was so gross. "Do you have a spare set?" Jackson did the same, and one of the bags broke open. A distinctively unpleasant odor filled the air. He made a face. "Old Chinese food. Nice." Katie scrunched her nose against the rotting egg roll smell. "This is the spare set. Earlier this week, the kids at the daycare flushed my first set down the toilet." "Why am I not surprised?" Jackson carefully moved some garbage with his hands, sifting through the mess, trying to stick to the dry bits of garbage. "You know, my life is not always a disaster," Katie retorted a little defensively. It might be a lie, but she felt the need to defend herself. It was true she tended to have more bad luck than anyone else she knew. "Maybe you could get a set of keys from the dealership," Jackson suggested hopefully. Then they wouldn't have to sort through all this garbage. "The car is 30 years old. It's a rust bucket hatchback that drinks a quart of oil every week. I don't think they're going to have keys for it." Katie sighed and began sorting through the garbage in earnest. After a half-hour of digging and sorting, they both had stains on their clothes from who knew what, and smelled like something dragged out from a rotting, fetid swamp. "Maybe I could hot-wire it for you?" Jackson offered, wiping his forehead and leaving a yellow smear behind. Even so, he was still sexy in his faded jeans and plaid shirt. Katy tamped down the thought. Digging in a dumpster wasn't exactly a romantic event. "Thanks, but no, someone might steal it." "Anyone who steals that car is doing you a favor," he muttered and stooped to sort through another round of garbage. "I need that car. I can't afford another one." Katy mentally braced herself and dug her fingers into some sort of goo, feeling for anything that resembled her keys. She couldn't afford any other car. She could barely afford the one she had. The daycare had recently reduced her hours because there was a drop in the population of the farming community and small town. Many people were packing up and moving to the nearby cities for jobs. Entire families were leaving, which meant that there just weren't as many kids. It didn't help that her landlord had recently stated that her rent was going up. Katy didn't see how this could make sense, since people were leaving. Surely more places were available now, so the rent should go down? Katy mulled her dilemma over and decided she would need to go shopping for a new place to live. The problem was, she couldn't afford first and last month's rent. She was stuck unless she did what everyone else was doing, leave for the city. She had lived all her life in this area and loved the small town feeling. She liked that everyone knew everyone. People waved on the streets. People helped each other. These were her neighbors and friends, and it would be so hard to go. Katy would need to if they closed down the daycare, which was the latest rumor going round. There just weren't any other jobs available. "Got them." Jackson straightened and held out a pair of keys. "Thank goodness," Katy said tiredly in relief. She reached out and wiped off some of the gook on them. A feeling of despair settled in her stomach as she looked up at Jackson. "These aren't mine." Jackson frowned as he studied her. Katy seemed dispirited and weary. He wondered where the tomboy he remembered who had been so full of energy had gone. "Good gravy." Katy had a smile at the familiar turn of phrase. Donna Davis, Jackson's mom, refused to allow swearing in her home, which meant the kids had come up with some entertaining alternatives. Her eyes were starting to smart, either from weary desperation or from the fumes in the dumpster. Unfortunately, she didn't dare wipe them because of the junk on her now freezing fingers. Her shoulders slumped. "Yeah, good gravy." "It's starting to get dark. Do you want me to get the flashlight out of the truck?" Jackson offered. Katy nodded and sniffed. She bit her lip. She was not going to cry over this. It was just a set of keys. She bent to search some more. Jackson hesitated a moment before getting to get the flashlight. For a moment, he thought Katy was about to cry, which was something he hadn't seen since she broke her arm falling out of a tree in the apple orchard when she was 10. He hoped he had been wrong. He came back directly with the flashlight, and they searched for another hour before giving it up for the night. It was just too cold and too dark. They were probably going to bury the keys deeper if they kept it up. Katy accepted Jackson's offer to drive her home. They made sure the dumpster wasn't going to be empty tomorrow and left the grocery store. Katy held her freezing hands to the vents, enjoying the heat. The heater in her car had quit 2 weeks ago, and it was becoming a problem as winter approached. She would have to scrape up the money somehow to get it fixed. Jackson offered to help bring in her groceries, but Katy declined. Fortunately, she had a second house key under the potted plant on the tiny porch of the townhouse. The row of houses were tired and tiny, not in the best location of town. Each house was split into apartments, making them more affordable for the tenants. Many people called them the poorhouse apartments because the maintenance wasn't kept up and the inhabitants simply couldn't afford better. However, rent was cheap and it was home for now. Katy grabbed her 3 bags and thanked Jackson for the help and the ride. She would go searching through the dumpster again tomorrow. Hopefully, she would find her keys. He watched her until she opened the door and gave him a wave. Jackson frowned as he thought over what had happened to Katy. She didn't look like she was doing so well. The Suttons had sold their farm a few years ago when things had begun a downturn in the area. The local gossip said they barely broke even. Katy's parents had chosen to relocate to Beaufort, another town that was about an hour's drive from Pendle. Katy had remained behind since she had a job here. Prices for operating farms were always edging upward, while the profit each farm received seemed to get smaller every year. A number of families in the area had given up and moved to the cities for jobs. It was a crisis in the area. There were more and more empty houses and barns, as other farmers farmed the land. Jackson hadn't seen much of Katy since she had gone to college. He had known she returned to Pendle, but Trent was still at college doing extra courses and working toward a doctorate, and since Trent was the main reason she came to the Davises' house, Jackson hadn't been in contact with her. He was a little concerned over the turn her life had taken. Jackson drove to the family farm. It didn't take him long to bring the groceries into the kitchen. His mother came to help put things away, wrinkling her nose. "Why do you smell like a compost pile?" Donna Davis asked as she pulled items out of a bag. "You will never believe it, but Katy Sutton accidentally tossed her keys in a dumpster." Jackson put away jars of peanut butter and jam after he had washed his hands thoroughly. "Oh, that girl." Donna shook her head and clucked in sympathy. "She has the worst luck." "She doesn't seem to be doing so well. She lives in the poorhouse apartments," frowned Jackson. The nickname of the townhouse complex was apt. Jackson hadn't been to that part of town for a while, and the buildings looked even worse than when he had last seen them. He wondered if it was legal to let maintenance and groundwork build up like that. Jackson? Is there something I should know?" Donna looked at her son, raising an eyebrow in concern. Jackson looked at the box his mother was holding up. It was a pregnancy kit. "That's not our bag." He took a deep breath and wondered just how much trouble Katy was in. Katy enjoyed a hot shower after stuffing her clothes into a garbage bag to take to the laundromat later. She wrapped herself in a robe and started to put her groceries away when there was a knock on her door. Katy let her neighbor, Sylvie, in. "Did you get it?" Sylvie asked, blowing on her hands and taking off her shoes. "Yep, just a moment." Katy rooted through the bags on the kitchen table, searching for an item that Sylvie had requested from the grocery store. "You will never believe what happened today." "I think you should start a blog or write a book about all the things that happened to you. Call it Katy's Curse or something," Sylvie said as she grabbed the kettle and set some water on to boil, making herself at home. "Very funny." Katy's brow furrowed as she searched again through the bags, thinking that she had overlooked the box. "I know I bought it." "What's this?" Sylvie grabbed a tin off the table that Katy had set there in distraction while looking for Sylvie's purchase. "Shoe polish? Since when do you use shoe polish?" She didn't. Suddenly Katy's face flushed in mortification as the truth dawned on her. "He has your pregnancy kit. He's going to think it's mine." "Who?" Sylvie asked curiously. She put sugar and 2 mugs on the table. "Want to catch me up on what you're talking about?" Katy sat down and put her head in her hands with a moan. Bad things tended to happen to her, but today had been over the top. "Jackson Davis helped me search for my keys. He gave me a ride home from the grocery store, and I must have mixed one of his bags up with mine. He has your pregnancy kit." "Oh dear," Sylvie laughed. This is taking things to a whole new level. Can you imagine the look on his face when he pulls that out of the bag? Katy groaned. I don't know what I'm going to say to him. Tell him the truth. You were buying it for your friend who was stupid enough to agree to risk it during a weak moment with her husband. Sylvie rolled her eyes. Never going to run out of condoms again. Cheaper than diapers, Katy said dryly. She doubted Jackson would believe her if she told him it was for a friend. That was pretty much code for, it's me, but I don't want anyone to know. The only good news was that Katy was pretty certain that Jackson wouldn't spread the gossip. He wasn't the type. Cheers to that. Sylvie made tea and poured for both of them. We already have 4 running around. If there's a 5th, I will lose my mind. I keep telling him to get snipped, but he says he's too attached to his jollies. Good thing they don't let women have scissors during labor. There would be a lot of castrated men in this country. I wish I had your problem. Katy sipped her tea. Unfortunately, there's a shortage of good single guys around. And Jackson Davis isn't one of them? Sylvie said knowingly. She grinned at Katy's instant blush. Well, there's going to be a lot less in town soon. Hawkins is closing. What? No. Katy cried in surprise. Why she was surprised, she didn't know. Rumors had been going around that the furniture company was barely getting by for years and could close at any moment. Please tell me you're joking. No, it's done. The bank is going to sell out everything at auction, then liquidate whatever is left over. The company is declaring bankruptcy. The announcement was made today at the plant. Everyone got their last paycheck and a small bonus. No severances since the family just can't afford it, shrugged Sylvie. It wasn't unexpected, yet it would still be difficult to transition to the city with only a small bonus, rather than a full severance. There was nothing they could do about it, so Sylvie had chosen to accept it. Neil has an interview later this week with a different company for a material handling job at a plant in the city. You're moving too? Katy was dismayed. Sylvie had been her friend ever since she had moved in next door after college. There's no choice. We have to be realistic. Sylvie stirred her tea. Hawkins employed nearly 200 people. There aren't enough jobs in a community this size for all those people. In fact, I think there's only one job opening right now, and it's part-time for the septic service. Those who can't afford to retire of the Hawkins employees are going to be moving. I'm glad we stayed renting because I expect housing's going to take a real hit with so many families moving. How many people have families with small kids at Hawkins? Katy asked, a feeling of dread building up in her. If more people moved, she would likely be out of a job. A lot? At least 40 or 50 do. Sylvie looked at her friend in sympathy. You think they'll close the daycare? Katy nodded sadly. It's just a matter of time. There's talk of closing the grade school, too. Where would the kids go? Asked a concerned Sylvie. Buford? Katy supplied with a shrug. It's the closest. It's an hour away. Sylvie shook her head in exasperation. We live in a dying town. Katy nodded, agreeing with her friend. Find a good spot in the city. I'll probably be following you pretty soon. Unless you find a good man right here in Pendle who can support you, Sylvie suggested with a wicked smile. Someone like Jackson Davis? That's not likely to happen. Katy rolled her eyes and had another sip of her tea, trying to ignore the blush that stained her cheeks just at the mention of her crush's name. He thinks of me as his younger brother's friend, nothing more. And since Trent is away at college, I have zero excuses to visit the Davises and try to get him to notice me. Not that he ever has noticed me. Sylvie ignored her friend's glum mood. Maybe if you did something with your hair, or wore something girly rather than those jeans all the time. I tried that before going to college. Katy frowned at the memory. Everyone thought I was casting a lure for Trent. Even Donna, their mother, got all excited. She would love to see Trent and I together. Jackson barely blinked. I believed his words were, "What's with the clothes? They aren't really you." "What's wrong with Trent?" wondered Sylvie with a laugh at Katie's imitation of Jackson. "Why not try to get Trent for a boyfriend?" "Besides the fact that we feel like brother and sister?" Katie responded dryly. "He's just not Jackson. Jackson is the one that makes me blush, makes my heart beat faster, makes me feel like the world will be okay when he's around. It's silly, and if I could get over it, I would." "Well, there are other guys in town," Sylvie noted. "What about Dixby Cooley?" "He's engaged to Melody?" Katie pointed out, taking a sip from her cup after putting a little more sugar in for taste. "We all know that's a sham." Sylvie raised a hand, waving it dismissively. "He and Melody are trying to get Brant Hawkins up to scratch by trying to make Brant jealous." "Brant is jealous and stubborn. It's not going to work." Katie grabbed a tin of cookies out of one grocery bag, popping open the lid. It was a mistake for them to think that they could manipulate Brant like that. If they keep it up, they will end up at the altar, and Brant will be alone. "Why don't you go after Brant?" Sylvie took an offered cookie, dunking it in her tea. Katie wrinkled her nose at Sylvie's odd habit, eating her own cookie dry. "First, he's in love with Melody. Second, he's just as broke as I am. He also doesn't have a job, since you said the Hawkins Fine Furniture Company has closed. Third, he's not Jackson." "No one is Jackson but Jackson himself, honey," Sylvie told Katie wryly. "I know. He's ruined me for all others," Katie agreed readily. "You haven't even kissed the guy or dated him. How could he possibly ruin you for all others?" protested Sylvie. "He just has," Katie said morosely. "I'm going to end up an old maid like Mabel Talbot is, out in the country with all her cats." "Doesn't Mabel run the local animal shelter?" Sylvie pursed her lips. "She's going to have cats there." "Yes, but she enjoys them. Anyone trying to adopt a dog? No problem. Anyone trying to adopt a cat? Mabel gives them the 3rd degree, and practically has them sign paperwork that the cat will live like royalty. Mabel is a cat lady," insisted Katie. "I'm going to end up like her, old and alone. I already had my first cat coming to my back door." Sylvie laughed. "Mabel is only 30. She's hardly old. Plus, you and I both know that cat coming to your back door is from your neighbors. It's not a stray." Katie shrugged. Since Jackson Davis didn't seem to notice her existence, she probably would end up alone. Bring on the cats. "When are you going to talk to Jackson about my pregnancy kit?" dryly said Sylvie. "Hopefully, never," Katie replied fervently. "I'll just have to go to the grocery store and get you a new one." "Do you really think you're never going to speak to Jackson again?" Sylvie didn't believe it for a moment. The town was just too small. Everyone ran into everyone eventually. "If I have to move because I lose my job, I really won't have to talk to Jackson again," said Katie. Somehow, it didn't make her feel any better. Jackson had been such a large part of her childhood. It felt like he was a part of her. As embarrassed as she was that Jackson would assume the pregnancy kit was hers, Katie couldn't imagine never seeing him again. "Sweetie, you are hopeless." Sylvie grabbed another cookie. "I know," agreed Katie. She just had the worst luck. If you enjoyed this chapter of Kissing Katie, look for Chapter 2 right here on YouTube. You can hit the subscribe button and the bell, and you'll be notified every time a new chapter drops from any of my audiobooks. Happy listening!